Welcome, folks, to another episode of Signal 11 Outdoors. We are recording this podcast on Sunday prior to 9/11, and this is going to be getting released on 9/11. So as everyone knows who watches this, this is basically a hunting podcast. We relate hunting and fishing in one form or another to every podcast that we've done so far. But being it's 9/11, I had to reach out to a friend of mine, but also a really special human being and a very special guest for 9/11. So I'm going to say hello to Will Jimeno. Will, how are you?
Hey, Steve. Thanks for having me on the show.
Yeah, thanks for getting you on here. I just want to preface this to let everybody know I've gotten to be friends with Will over the years. He's a great person and awesome friend, and we're going to talk about a lot of things. I'm going to start this. We're going to start the whole conversation off about 9/11 because this is being released on 9/11, and 9/11 should be extremely important to every American. I know it's extremely important to Will and myself. So we're going to start off talking about 9/11. I just want to let everybody know we're going to get into archery. We're going to get into some other messages that Will's going to probably have for us as we get through this. But I'm going to start out with 9/11. I just want to mention real quick for those of you who don't know Will, and I know many of you do, Will is one of the very few survivors from 9/11 as a Port Authority police officer with his crew. His story is astronomically important for everybody to learn if you don't know about Will, because Will is one guy, but he's one of many guys that day. And his story really relates to human beings in every profession or form or fashion in life, because his will, no pun intended on your name, Will, but his will to survive and his will to help people throughout his life now is absolutely incredible. That's why I love this guy. So, Will, if you could, let me just let everybody know we're going to touch on what Will went through, but for those of you who maybe have heard of Will or didn't, there's a movie. It's basically based on the day and the time and the crew that Will operated with, and it's a 2006 movie, I believe. I'm going to let Will touch on it. But also, there's a podcast that I think his name is, how do you say, John Bernthal? Will, is that how you say his
Yes,
name?
John Byrne. Yeah.
Yeah. Go see that. Go watch that podcast. They have a great. I don't know if it's about an hour. I think it's called Real Ones. Awesome. I've actually watched it because all the years I've known Will, I've never really talked to Will about any really of this stuff. So, Will, if you don't mind, just touch on just the basics, and we're going to lead into archery. Just give the basics of what happened on 9/11 to you and your crew, and this way we can kind of preface everything else we're going to talk about as to 9/11 and how it pertains to you.
Yeah, sure, Steve. And again, thank you for having me on podcast here as we get close to the 24th anniversary of 9/11. I was a Port Authority police officer on September 11th of 2001. I truly was living my dream. That's all I ever wanted to be, was a police officer. 6 weeks before the attack, I achieved what I felt was the American dream. I bought my first home in Clifton, 20 minutes outside New York City, because I was assigned to the bus terminal in Midtown Manhattan. You know, great day, beautiful day. As people look back, there wasn't a cloud in the sky, and I got up, got ready for work because I was working day tours. I went into my bedroom, gave my wife Allison a kiss, gave her belly a kiss goodbye because my wife was 7 months pregnant. I went into the next room and gave my little 4-year-old girl Bianca a kiss and went to work. Beautiful day. I loved the bus terminal. It was very hectic. A lot of stuff going on there. If you were an active cop like I was and my squad mates, went downstairs to the locker room, got dressed, went upstairs. We were given our positions for the day, our assignments. Mine was to post 35, which is the corner of 42nd Avenue. And what we have at the bus terminal in the mornings and the afternoons, what we call the rush. So you have thousands of people coming from New Jersey, Connecticut, upstate New York. I mean, it's just a massive amount of people coming through these two huge buildings that are from 42nd Street to 43rd Street between 8th and 9th Avenue. And for those that don't know the Port Authority Police, we are the 26th largest department in the country. We have police officers in both states, and we protect and serve all the customers and people coming through our facilities at 9 different facilities in both states of New York and New Jersey. So we have the World Trade Center, we have all the major airports, we have the bridges, the tunnels, the PATH train, Port Newark, the bus terminal. That's where I work. But anyway, on that morning, I was just doing my job, standing, looking at the doorway as people came in onto the street of 8th Avenue. I had 8th Avenue behind me and 42nd to 2nd Street to my right. There was an awning above me, and I couldn't see above me, but I looked over at one point to the corner, and I saw one of my sergeants, Sergeant Ross, with 2 fellow officers standing out there outside the awning, and Sergeant McLaughlin was actually, Sergeant Ross was actually looking up and was following something. I didn't know what it was, but for those who have never been to New York City, what do you call it? An intersection in New York City is pretty large. And for maybe 2 seconds, the whole intersection went dark. A shadow came over it, which I thought was weird, but again, it's New York City, a lot of sound. I didn't really hear anything, and I just saw the sergeant following it with his fingers. So I went back to doing my job. A couple minutes later, our radios crackled. They had asked all units to come back to the police desk, 840, which is our code for that. So at that point, I started walking across 41st Street, went over to the building where our police desk is, and I hooked up with fellow officer Dominic Ciasullo. Dominic was a high school teacher who actually came over to the Port Authority for the finances. But in those 9 months leading up to the attack, because we graduated at the World Trade Center at the Marriott, we were the 100th class. So we only had 9 months on the job. We were rookies. But, the 9 months at the bus terminal at Midtown Manhattan got you seasoned very quickly, which I was grateful for. But we're going back to the police desk, and, Dominic said, Will, man, something bad must have happened for them to call us all back off post at that particular time in the morning, because we have a lot of people coming through the buildings. And I said, yeah. So we walked around the police desk, and I looked up and I saw our lieutenants and our sergeants. And I'm a former veteran from the U.S. Navy. And one of the things I learned in the Navy was always follow somebody in to a bad situation that knows what they're doing, because your chances of coming out are greater. And that's something that stuck with me through my lifetime since I was in the Navy. And one of those people that I trusted with my life was Sergeant John McLaughlin. I have been to several gun calls with him, other things. He was always professional, decisive, and a great leader. And I could see concern in his face, which really caught my attention. But we continued on, and we went back into what's called our reserve room, our break room. We had a big TV set on there, and New York One, which is a news station in New York, was on. And all we see is the World Trade Center in Tower One with a big black gaping hole in it. Now, what sets the Port Authority Police apart from our counterparts on the New York side as well as the New Jersey side is we were attacked in 1993. And when the academy, they told us, look, we also deal with terrorists. We're going to do all the regular stuff cops do, but our 9 facilities are target-rich environments. At any time, a terrorist would love to attack and kill as many people at the airports, the bridges, the tunnels, the bus terminal, and of course the World Trade Center, which again had already been attacked in 93. But it's so funny because I always tell people it's like high school. I was an okay student, but I sucked at algebra. And I'm like, when am I going to need algebra in life? And thank goodness up to this point, I haven't needed it. I'll know what you owe me with interest if you owe me money. But beside that, algebra is not my forte. But same thing, right? You're in the academy, you're being taught this, and then you're thinking, when am I going to see terrorists? Well, it was actually happening. And I remember when I saw that, the TV, that's when Sergeant Ross said, those are terrorists. Right away, we knew we were being under attack. So I turned around, grabbed the payphone, tried to call my wife, because anytime something happened at the bus terminal, I would communicate to her, hey, I'm okay. I got through to her. She asked me some questions. We didn't really get much time to talk because at that point, our inspector, our commanding officer, Inspector Fields, came in the back, said, hey, we're going to call off your names. We've commandeered a bus on 9th Avenue. We're going down to the World Trade Center, where, again, it's owned and operated by the Port Authority. We have a command center there. We have cops there already. And we're going to go down there and help our brothers and sisters evacuate. So I remember hanging up the phone. Later, Allison would tell me, like, that's the first time you ever hung up a phone with me without saying I love you. But again, as first responders, and Steve, you understand that when the call comes in, our focus is on the job and helping people. And that's what I thought about. 20 of us got onto that bus, and we started heading downtown to the World Trade Center. And usually it takes could take 20, 30 minutes to get downtown, depending on what's going on. But that day we were flying. And it was about 2 city blocks back when the whole bus went silent, because 2 city blocks back off of West Broadway, we looked to our right, and there was a person in the street being tended by an FDY ambulance. And we could see that the person looked like they had died. There was a lot of blood. And that's when we realized, wow, this is bad. I mean, 2 city blocks back, and something flew back and hit this person. And we went one more block. We got off the bus, and the street directly in front of us was Vesey Street. So you have Vesey Street, you had the West Side Highway, you had Liberty Street on the backside, and then the Church Street. So that made the square of the World Trade Center. So we were looking at Vesey Street. And unfortunately, when we stepped off the bus, what I saw, something that I hope nobody will ever see here in America again, especially being a veteran and a police officer, was war. I mean, it was a war. We were at war, and I remember just papers flying everywhere, just like you see from the old footage. And I remember looking up, and I see Tower 1 on fire with a big black gaping hole. And then I looked at the corner of 2, and the corner of 2 to me looked like, okay, the plane hit, it blew up, and some of the debris caught the corner of 2 on fire. What we didn't know, unfortunately, was when we were route from Midtown Manhattan to downtown, the second plane had hit. So we couldn't see from our vantage point that there was another big gaping hole on the other side of two. That would play a factor later, but at that point, in front of us was nothing but destruction. I mean, there was nobody on Vesey Street. That's when my sergeant, John McLaughlin, came running because he had led us down there in a police suburban. He had parked the police suburban on the corner of Vesey and Church and came running through this war zone, ran up to us and said, "Hey, I need volunteers. I need guys that know how to use Scott air packs." As Port Authority police officers, we're not only trained in law enforcement, but we are the first responders at all our facilities, the airports and everywhere else. So we're trained in firefighting as well. And of course, as far as first aid, but we're also trained as firefighters. So at that point, myself, Dominic Ciasullo, and another fellow officer, Antonio Rodriguez, who had 4 years on the NYPD, had come over for the finances at the Port Authority, said, "Hey, we just graduated. We know how to use Scott Air Pack." So at that point, we became a team of four and we started running toward the buildings. And, this is something I share with everybody is that, being macho is what you have to do when you have to do it no matter what. And as we're running, and I thought that I was a strong guy, 33-year-old, a former Navy, as the bow hunter, felt comfortable, strong, but, man, I was scared. I was really scared because as we're running, I see pieces of the plane, I see debris everywhere. Unfortunately, I saw human remains. And, we're human beings. But then I thought about my oath to serve and protect. I could see concern in Dominic's face, Antonio's face, the sergeants, and we have a job to do because as first responders, when we're called upon, people are depending on us. So we forge forward. I just got over that fear. And again, that's what I tell people. That's where courage comes from, is overcoming your fear. So whatever you're afraid of in life, conquer that. Go forward. Just do it anyway. And you'll see that you'll be able to conquer that. But we went forward and we got to the side of building 5. Sergeant McLaughlin said, "Jimeno, take our 8-point hats, which we wore at the time, our billy clubs, our PR-24s at the time we carried, our memo books, run up to the police suburban, drop all our equipment, come back in and meet us in an emergency room, E-rooms, as we call them. They're set up throughout the World Trade Center so first responders can have bunker gear, helmets, axes, whatever we need to be able to help people." So I ran up to the corner of Church and Vesey, came around the corner, our police suburban was there. And that's when I looked down Church Street and all I could see was like thousands of people running away. And again, I don't know. I didn't realize that Tower 2 was in distress. So I threw the equipment in the car and that's when I realized, hey, dummy, wake up. Stuff's falling from above. So I got close to the building because a big piece of concrete had smashed our police suburban. So at that point, I ran back, got into the concourse of the World Trade Center. For those that never got to see the World Trade Center, especially the young men and women who are listening to this podcast, there were 2 large buildings on a 16-acre lot. And basically, you would enter into we call the concourse level. It's a mall level, if you will. Shops, restaurants, there were escalators and elevators that would take you down to the PATH train and to the subway. And you would get to both towers through the concourse level, where you would enter through big revolving glass doors into the lobby of Tower 1 or Tower 2. So we went in and we got to the first E-room. Antonio Rodriguez put on a bunker coat, a helmet. There were no more bunker coats that would fit me and Dominic. So we just put on our Scott Air Packs, we put on our helmets, and we looked like firefighters with guns on our side. At that point, we checked each other's equipment, and one thing we promised each other was we don't leave each other no matter what happens. So at that point, Sergeant McLaughlin said, "Let's go. We're going to the police desk." And I remember kind of chuckling because we get on the elevator and I thought to myself, well, I know there's a raging fire up there, but we're not supposed to be getting on elevators if there's a fire, but I trusted the sergeant. So we went to the police desk, went out there, went into the police desk. That's when Sergeant McLaughlin said, "Hey guys, grab a mail canvas cart, one of the mail canvas carts, start loading more Scott Air Packs, more axes, whatever you get your hands on." So we did. And it's funny because if you watch the French documentary that the French cameramen follow first with the FDNY, they break off from the FDNY and actually join Port Authority police detectives. They're actually at the police desk with us. You won't see me, but you'll see my sergeant, John McLaughlin. They actually get him on video, which is weird. But everything's happening so fast and things just didn't seem real. I remember walking into police desk and our police detectives had actually brought in a piece of the plane, evidence. And I'm looking at it like, I know there's a plane that hit, but your mind is just like, why is this here? And it was really weird. But at that point, we leave the police desk. We come back into the concourse level. I'm pushing this cart. We come out and there was about 2 inches of water on the deck. And the one thing that struck me was how people from different areas, different ways of life, different political views were helping each other. And people always ask me, "Well, what's the one thing you saw the most on 9/11?" And I had to tell people 24 years later is love. Total strangers, like I said, from different ethnicities, religions, political views, guaranteed, were all coming out of Tower 1 in a single file line, helping each other. There was a black gentleman with a white gentleman with a blonde woman. They were carrying what, a severe cut on her leg, and she was bleeding, but they were carrying her, and everybody was helping each other. And I thought to myself, man, if these civilians can be this brave, us in uniform, we need to be above them. At that point, we headed toward Tower 2, where we met up with Christopher Amoroso, a fellow police officer who had been recently transferred from the bus terminal who we work with to the World Trade Center. There's a famous picture of Christopher by a Daily News photographer saving a woman. I think that might have been the third or fourth person he saved that day when he came back in and saw us. And being we worked together, he said, Sarge, can I join you? And he said, yes, let's go. Radio it into the police desk that you're coming with us. And we became a team of 5. And now we're heading toward Tower 2. Again, not knowing Tower 2 was in distress. We got right in front of the big glass revolving doors where you can look into the lobby of 2 toward the elevator banks. And Sergeant Blocker said, Jimeno, stay here with the cart. The rest of you guys come down. So they went down a side door down to another emergency room where they were going to get more equipment. And I'm standing there. And again, feel I'm a tough guy, right? Well, man, I was scared again because as I look into the lobby of 2, I see unfortunate people who have died. I see people injured. I can look through and see our cops and NYPD cops taking their handguns and actually shooting out the glass so more people can get out. And people just hurting out there. But unfortunately, what I also saw was concrete falling onto Liberty Street. I could see it and I could hear it. But then there was a distinctive second sound. And unfortunately, that was the sound of a human body. And I could see bodies actually falling and concrete falling. And let me tell you, that was tough. And a lot of fear came over me. And that's when I was approached by another fellow officer, Bruce Reynolds. Now, I had not met Bruce. He was a senior officer. And at that time, senior officers would get the assignment at the George Washington Bridge. And so our officers from the GWB actually came down, and Bruce was one of them. He was short, African-American, bald. He was sweating. He had a Scott Air pack on. He walked toward me. And the only reason I recognized Bruce was I grew up in Hackensack, New Jersey, so we have the Bergen record there. And unfortunately, people use our bridge there at the George Washington Bridge to end their life. But, sometimes, and hopefully we wish more, our Port Authority police officer actually saved people from jumping. And I had seen Bruce in the paper helping people that were trying to jump and saving their lives. And as he walked up to me, he said, Reynolds, GWB, George Washington Bridge. I said, Jimeno, BT, bus terminal. And he said something to me that was just pivotal. He said, you know what, kid? It's going to be a long day, but we're going to get a lot of people home. And I needed that at that moment. We chit-chatted for a little bit. I saw Sergeant McLaughlin starting to come up. He said, hey, stay safe. He walked away. That'd be the last time I saw Bruce Reynolds because he perished when that tower came down alongside many other firefighters and other first responders at the 2nd Command Center under the Tower 2. But at that point, the rest of the team came up, and we were going to now go back down this long hallway, make a left, and go to Tower 1. And at that point, Antonio Rodriguez says to me, Will, you've been pushing the cart from the police desk here. Let's switch because if you're tired, you're not going to be any good when we get to where we're going. So I thought, all right, teamwork. So we switched spots. Antonio's at the 6 o'clock position of the cart. Christopher Amoroso is to his 3 o'clock. Sergeant McLaughlin's at the front of the cart at the 11 o'clock position. I'm directly at 12 o'clock in front of it. And Dominic was at the 2 o'clock position. And we start going down this hallway. Halfway down that hallway, which turns out to be a miracle, we stop. And there's a doorway to our right. Sergeant McLaughlin stops to talk to some firefighters and an EMT. And he says, hey, listen, be careful. I just came up from the B1 level. The shafts are buckling, so just be careful. And that's when our inspector called and said, hey, where are you guys at? Asking for our location. Sergeant McLaughlin was explaining to him where we were. And I had only been in those 9 months twice to the World Trade Center for protests, so I didn't really know the buildings. Sergeant McLaughlin knew the buildings like the back of his hand because he helped set up the security after the 93 bombing. So that's when we heard a humongous boom. And I'm not giving it justice. It was just horrific explosion. And I turned around from where we were coming from and looking back into the lobby of 2, and I see a fireball, the size of my house. And I'm standing there just holding onto my helmet and everything's shaking like an earthquake. And I remember thinking to myself, I'm going to die. And that's when Sergeant McLaughlin, which I go back to that saying, follow somebody in to a bad situation that knows what they're doing. Because at that moment, what Sergeant McLaughlin saw and I didn't see was as the building's coming down, it is pushing debris in all directions. Well, what he saw was a wall of debris coming toward us. And again, nobody thought those buildings were coming down. Sergeant McLaughlin thought car bomb. What do they do in the Middle East? They blow something up, send the first responders in, kill them again. So he thought, I got to get my guys to safety. So he said, run toward the freight elevator. And all I knew was Dominic was running. I followed Dominic into this hallway. I could look behind me. I could see Sergeant McLaughlin behind me. And that's the first time I asked myself, Will, what did you get yourself into? Because I could see the lights flickering and then brown stuff, which of course today I know is the building coming down. And next thing you know, we got picked up and thrown on my back. And all I know is that for us law enforcement, our first line of communication is what saves our lives. Is communication is key. So I went from my radio on my lapel. I'm yelling 813 officers now, which is our code for like send everybody. And I'm trying to tell them where I'm at. And all I can say is we're at the World Trade Center. We're getting concrete hit on. We're getting beat up by concrete. Something hits my hand. I lose my radio. Now all I do is grab my helmet and hold on for dear life. And when I tell you, Steve, something hit my helmet and I had a chin strap and it ripped it off my head. And all I could do was like hold on for dear life. And it seemed like it was happening forever. And it's felt like the only way I can equate it's like just imagine a million freight trains coming down you full bore. And so I just held on for dear life, covered my head. And when everything was said and done, we went pitch black, went silent. And it went silent for a while and dark. And then finally I could kind of start seeing, just imagine you're in a cocoon and it's just grayish because above me at 30 feet, 20, 30 feet up, I could see a hole and it was starting, light was just starting to trickle in. So I could see. And when I could see, all I see is like concrete all around me. I realized that I'm actually buried. And what I know today is actually a wall fell on me. And to my left, in a push-up position face down, is Dominic. He's right to my left. And his head is around the area of my elbow. In front of me, at the bottom of my feet, all I see is concrete. And then to my right, there was a little bit of a space. And that's when I'm kind of like, in shock. And Sergeant McLaughlin now is about, I don't know how far, maybe 5-10 feet beyond the concrete that is at my feet. And he is actually stuck in the initial collapse in a fetal position. And he says, as being a leader he is, 20 years on the job, he was one of our former ESU units, a SWAT officer. And he says, sound off. So I said, Jimeno. Dominic said Ciasullo, his last name. And then we didn't hear Antonio Rodriguez or Christopher Amoroso. And we used to call, Chris just Chris. And then Antonio Rodriguez's nickname was A-Rod. And I just started yelling, Chris, A-Rod, Chris, A-Rod. And I must have yelled their names for like 2 minutes. And that's when Dominic said, Willie, they're in a better place. And that's when we realized we lost 2 Americans, 2 fellow officers, 2 husbands, 2 fathers. And that was tough. At that point, Sergeant McLaughlin said, what's everybody's condition? I said, I can't move. And I'm starting to feel pain. And the only way I can equate that pain is just take 80 Chevy Suburbans and put them on your left side of your leg. I mean, that's the kind of pressure I was feeling. And I remember saying, I'm feeling pain. I can't move. Dominic at that point says, I think I can shimmy out of here. I'm stuck, but I'm not injured. So it took a little bit, but Dominic was able to get out of his skydive. He literally had to crawl over my face because it was only about 18 inches above me and it was all concrete, jagged stuff. He crawled over my face, and you can imagine a gun belt scraping across your face, but he gets into this little area, couldn't stand up. And, at that point, he had a decision to make. He says, Sarge, I can get up that hole probably and go for help. And Sergeant McLaughlin said, no, if you leave us, you'll never find us. It's a debris field up there. He goes, you got to get Jimeno out, and you and Jimeno get me out, which makes sense, right, tactically. And I know it's hard for people who weren't military or law enforcement or first responder to understand that, you don't leave a brother behind. And but we're human beings, right? At the same time, self-preservation is high on our list, And we kind of talked about it. Dom said, Will, I got a wife and kids at home. I said, bro, I got a wife, a kid, and I got a baby on the way. And we kind of talked about it, but he did the right thing. He turned around and said, I'm going to get you out. So he started trying to get me out, and he tried for about 15 minutes, and he couldn't get me out. And that's when that fear came over again, because he's like, Will, I can't get you out. I'm like, oh my God. And that's when we hear the second boom, and here it comes again. So at this point, I realized, hey, I'm going to die. So this is something I've always done to my family in sign language, means I love you. I grab my arms, cross my arms, and just figured this is it. If they find me, I hope they tell my wife, Allison, that this is the way we found them. She'll know that's when I first thought of my family, and because it's always about the civilians, my teammates. And then at the end, it's like, think about my family because I thought it was over. Stuff started coming in. I'm getting hit harder. I'm yelling. Sergeant McLaughlin now is being crushed to the point that his weapon is being pushed into his body. That's how much pressure. And then, unfortunately, something came through that hole and hit Dominic severely, a big piece of concrete. When everything's said and done again, it took a little bit we'll see. And when I look over, my buddy Dominic was profusely bleeding out of his mouth and, he was passing. And he said, Willie, I'm dying. And I kept just saying, Dom, hold on, hold on. And he goes, no, William, I'm dying. He asked the sergeant for a break, which was really weird. He said, hey, Sergeant, can I get a 3-8, which is our code for a break? And Sergeant McLaughlin knew something bad was happening. And he even stopped yelling because he was in a lot of pain. And he said, yeah, you can have a 3-8. And Dominic said, Willie, don't let anybody forget that I died trying to save you guys. I said, Dominic, I would never let anybody forget that. At that point, he took his sidearm, pointed it up toward that hole, and fired one round in a last-ditch effort to let somebody up there know we were down there. And he slumped over and passed. And I'll be honest with you, I was hysterical at that point. It took a little bit for me to calm myself down. Sergeant McLaughlin helped me calm down. And I said, Sarge, what do we do now? You know, because you're looking at your training. And he said, Jimeno, there is no training that any first responder or anybody will ever have to deal with this. It's going to come down to our will to survive. At that point, you know, we struggled for many, many hours. A lot of bad things happened down there. We had fireballs come in. Dominic's weapon fired off from the heat, shot 15 remaining rounds over my head. It was really, really bad. And at one point that evening, as the evening progressed, and I always tell people, this is for me the most important part uh, to my survival, if you will. Beside, you know, Antonio switching spots with me, Dominic trying to get me out, was at one point that evening I wanted to die. We had been crushed. We lost teammates. I had been burnt. I've been shot at. I was exhausted. We had become like the Michelin Man. Our bodies swelled up because we were suffering from compartment syndrome. And Sergeant McLaughlin was very straight with me when I asked him several hours into what's going to happen. He goes, look, if they don't get to us within a certain amount of time, we're going to die because we're going to suffer from compartment syndrome and our bodies are going to just pretty much stop working. And it was hard to hear, but I respected him for that because he was honest. We talked about our families. We tried to keep each other going. We prayed a lot. But at one point that evening, I just wanted to give up. And I just made my peace with God. I'm Catholic. I don't preach religion, but I'm Catholic. You know, came to this country at 2 years old as an immigrant. I love this country. My mom told me we're going to fly the American flag. We're going to learn English. You know, I served in the military and I love this country. And at that point, I said, God, you know, pretty much done. I'm going to give up. And I closed my eyes and I said, God, thank you for 33 great years. Thank you for 6 years with my beautiful wife, Allison, 4 years with my little girl, Bianca, and my parents for bringing me to this great country and raising me, always taking care of us, being supportive. You know, my time with my baby sister, Karen. But I said, you know, God, if I die today, I'm okay with it. You know, I die as an American. I die as a police officer trying to do the right thing. And I closed my eyes, but I said, God, I'm going to ask you for two things when I get to heaven. One was to see my little girl be born because I knew how hard this was going to be for my wife, not for me to be by her side when our little girl, which I knew we were having, was to be born that December. And the second, I tell people, you can laugh at this. I said, God, when I get to heaven, can I go have a glass of water? We were caked in concrete. I was so thirsty. And I remember just closing my eyes and ready to give up. And that's when I see, you can call it a vision, a dream, whatever you want, a person walking toward me with a white cologne robe. I can't see his face, brown hair. Over his left shoulder in the distance is a pond with tranquil trees around it. Over his right shoulder was a tall, endless sea of grass. And just peace came over me. And I knew who it was. For me, it was Jesus. And he's coming toward me. And what does he have in his hand? And like I said, people can laugh. He's got a big bottle of water. I don't know if it's Poland Spring, Avion, whatever it was. But I snapped out of that dream or that vision with a will to fight. Because at that moment, I realized if I give up and I die, nobody will hear my sergeant because he's further back. And thank God I got a big mouth. Second, if I didn't fight hard enough, I wasn't going to get home to my family. I would have gave up on them. If I gave up, I was giving up on the United States of America because I was allowing these cowards, these terrorists who were cowards that attacked innocent human people trying to make better lives for their families to win. So at that point, with some colorful words, I said, Sarge, we're going to get out of this fucking hellhole or we're going to die on our terms. And you know, the way I looked at it is like what I've since learned from people who are terminally ill. They'll live their life to the last moment. They don't sit there and regret things. They're like, I know I'm going to die, but I'm going to die on my terms, happy doing what I want. What I did, and we continue. And I cannot really express to everybody how horrific it was down there. I mean, take your worst nightmare, multiply by 1,000,000, and that to me still doesn't touch how bad it was down there. And at that point, I just kept fighting. We kept fighting. We kept each other going. It was very, very difficult. But around 8 o'clock that night, I hear United States Marine Corps. Can anybody hear us? Now, mind you, we are now in the epicenter. We are between both buildings. We had 220 stories hit us. And they had stopped the rescue workers from coming in earlier that day because, of course, it was dangerous. People were getting hurt. Buildings were shifting. But these two Marine reservists and a civilian broke through the lines and made their way into the epicenter where they heard me. They finally got to me, and I didn't know there was a little hole to my left side. And that's where they came up after I kept yelling, PD, officers down, please help. They made their way over, they shined the light, said, we got you, but we can't see you. So just imagine this. I'm now buried 10 hours. I could see the light flashing on my hand, and they can't see me because we look like the concrete. Like I said, I was thirsty, so I didn't really have much saliva, but somehow, some way, I got enough spit and put it right here on my palm or changed the concrete to my skin color. And he goes, we got you. At that point, they sent the civilian down what we call the pile, right? And they bumped into NYPD ESU Truck 1, New York City Truck 1 SWAT team, and the cavalry came. Scott Strauss and Patty McGee from the NYPD ESU Truck 1, and a civilian, Chuck Sharika, who came off the street, who was a former paramedic, said, I can give medical aid. These men had to burrow their way from my right side because they couldn't come down. And, Scott always describes it the best. They were like groundhogs. The area they had to wind through was so small and tight. When they got to me, all I saw was two bald heads, Scott Strauss and Chuck Sharika. And there wasn't much room. And when they got to me, it was very, very difficult. For the next 3 hours, they tried to extract me. At one point, they couldn't get me out because they had couldn't get my left leg out. It was stuck. And I kept that night, again, still not all there. I kept saying, you got to get to my partner. You got to get my partner. Because I said, basically Sergeant McLaughlin, but I never said my sergeant. So they thought I was talking, unfortunately, about my partner, Dominic Ciasullo. And they're like, this guy probably doesn't know that his friends passed. But I finally, I kept saying, it was like 2 hours into it. That's when, from the depths of hell, Sergeant McLaughlin was silent, and he was in so much pain all that, but he knew, let these guys work. And I kept yelling, get to my partner. Finally, 2 hours into it, Sergeant McLaughlin said, hey, how's it going? And they freaked out. They're like, oh my God, who's that? I said, that's my partner, Sergeant McLaughlin. Now, one of the things being that we're Port Authority Police of New York and New Jersey, we train with the NYPD as well as our Jersey counterparts. So being that these are ESU officers, they knew John McLaughlin because they have trained with him in the past, which was refreshing for me. Not only did I have Americans there and fellow officers, but now they knew John. So they're like, John McLaughlin? And they're like, yeah, who's that? And he's like, Scott Strauss, Patrick McGee. They knew each other. And at that point, they were working on me. And throughout those 3 hours, they were ordered several times to leave us because it was an encroaching fire. It was really bad up there. And these guys said, no, if they die, we die with them. Those are the kind of Americans that were there on September 11th. And I want people to understand that 24 years later. They finally got me out, brought me out of the hole, and I said, Sarge, hold on, they're going to get to you, because they couldn't get to the sergeant until they got me out. They pulled me up, and I looked up, I saw the moon, I didn't see the buildings, and I just said, where's everything? And a firefighter said, it's all gone. Okay. And that's the first time I cried. I didn't cry when I got hurt. I didn't cry when the guys died. I didn't cry through that evening. I cried because as a first responder, I felt like we failed. There was so many people still within those towers, and I just felt we failed. At that point, they took me down a line, I think of like 700 people, put me in the ambulance, took me to Bellevue Hospital. And that's the second time I cried because this was closer to midnight now. They got me out at 11 o'clock or so that night. They put me on the ambulance. And when I got there, as a first responder, you hope if there's a mass emergency, there's a doctor or nurse that might take a peek at you with a lot of victims just because you're doing the right thing. And they pulled me out of the ambulance, and all these doctors and nurses are standing around. I'm like, where's everybody? And they're like, you're it. They're telling me at that time that like I was one of the only survivors. And that was difficult. They rushed me into the emergency room. I remember just like bees buzzing around me, all these people. Apparently, I flatlined twice that night. I went through many, many surgeries. My sergeant was the last person to be pulled out alive from underneath the World Trade Center. We found out a year later that we're the only two to survive from under it. There's about 18 of us that survived. 13 in a stairwell, including Dave Lim, one of our K-9 officers with 13 firefighters. Jay Jonas from the FDNY, who actually is good friends with my sergeant. They were both from Goshen, New York, a Port Authority employee. And then the last person pulled out was Mrs. Guzman, who was a Port Authority employee. They found her the next day at noon topside, literally stuck in a stairwell with concrete, as well as two other people that survived the initial collapse that got out. So there's only a handful of us. And, I guess the message there is that no matter how bad a situation is, you're always going to find people that have the will to survive. And as Americans, they had flown over I say this as an American, they had flown over the 19th hijacker, I believe, over the Trade Center, and they had some law enforcement officers there with them. And he said, good, I hope they all died. And they knew our story, and they said, no, you didn't kill us all, which is a testament not only to me. And I always say, we're sharing my story, but it's a human story. It's our story. It's an American story. And I just remember, I was told that the officers on that helicopter said, no, you didn't kill us all. You can't kill Americans. You might knock us down, but and that's what happened to us. You know, those cowards, those terrorists, that they brought us to our knees, but we came together and we stood up. And since then, you know, I tell everybody, you know, you watch a lot of political stuff on the news, they want to make like we're divided. But let's look at back since 9/11, all the bad things have happened and how we come together, no matter what your political stance is, what your ethnicity is, what your religion is. There's more good in this world than bad. And that was proven that night. We went in and we found ourselves in need, and other people came to our aid. And that's the thing that I think people need to understand 24 years later. It's let's look at the good of that thing, not the bad. Let's honor all those that gave their lives, all the first responders. And let me tell you, a lot of civilians were heroes that day. Not only us in uniform, but a lot of Americans turned around, put their lives on the line to help total strangers. And that's what makes this country great, is we are one nation under God, indivisible. And that is something that, you know, I want anybody out there who's a youth and a younger generation to understand that we should learn all our America's history. We're not the perfect nation, but we're the best. And we got to teach all our history from, you know, World War One, World War Two, Korea, Vietnam, the Gulf War. We have to learn the sacrifices that Americans have made for our freedoms. And, you know, very proud of what my actions were on that September 11th. I always say, as a survivor, my duty is to remember my 37 Port Authority police officers, which is the most law enforcement officers lost in one day. That was our house, followed by our 23 NYPD officers, 43 firefighters, 2 FBI agents, 3 court officers, 8 EMTs, and the thousands of civilians that were lost that day. You know, I want people to remember them and understand that they were all heroes. And the way we honor them is by protecting our freedom and continuing to be good people. And that's what I try to do today. You know, we're blessed that we had that movie made about us called World Trade Center. Oliver Stone, you know, who people might not know, the movie Platoon is about him because he was a young Marine. That's his story. But years later, he wanted to tell the truth about that day so we can leave a legacy, which is actually used today. This week and throughout the year, I get messages from around the world that people watch that film. And I got to tell everybody, people love more Americans and America than you think. You know, the media try to tell us that, you know, this country doesn't like us. No, more people, and it was said by Tony Blair, the British Prime Minister, any country more people trying to get into than out is a special country. And that's us, the United States of America. So on that note, you know, you know, if you want to see more details, you can watch the movie World Trade Center by Oliver Stone, and you can see, and again, that gives you a glimpse of how horrific it was down there. It was worse. But the most important part about our film is that we're vessels for people to see what was happening that day. But what our families were going through at home, thousands of people's families were going through at home. We were just very fortunate that our families got a phone call that said, "Hey, we found them." You know, and we went through a lot of therapy, a lot of physical therapy, a lot of operations to be where we're at. And I'm grateful to be here talking to you today, Steve.
Wow. I mean, it's absolutely amazing story. You know, and I touched on before. Will and myself have never really. This is the most I've ever heard you speak about it. You know, and it's incredible. You know, and for the many for the many people who have no idea what they listen to what you say, they can relate to you. They're amazed by the story and all of it. But for the people who were never at that scene after the towers came down, they really can't imagine. Your story is actually, as I listen to it, I'm thinking about people watching this, my own family, civilians, you know, and everybody's going to be absolutely amazed by what you went through, and especially if they watch the movie, they'll get a really good idea. But for me, as a first responder on 9/11, I was at work, couldn't get to they wouldn't allow us to leave the city of Newark. So what we did is we relieved other guys to get them to you right away. If we were threatened, if we didn't come in, we'd be fired, basically. But I don't agree with what they did, but at the time it was pandemonium, total uncertainty, attack on American soil. But what I want to get to is when I ended up on 9/12, got there, I believe after they pulled out your Sarge. And I watched the sunrise from that pile. And I spent a lot of time there trying to make rescues and eventually doing recoveries. But the most amazing thing is because I was there to know where you were and your crew was, and to know that anybody survived from where you were. I crawled in there and tried to look in those voids, and it was absolutely impossible. So my point is that people can't really imagine where you were. It's easy to try to imagine, but I know where you were. It's amazing that you and your Sarge survived. And the other thing that's really amazing is the gentleman that got you out of there. I mean, what they had to do to get to you guys was absolutely incredible. And it all ties into to me, it ties into one thing. You, your Sarge survived from below that, the guys that did the work, and all of us that were there. I think it's amazing that so many years have passed, and you yourself do a phenomenal job of letting people never forget about your coworkers and everybody else. I am always inspired. I try to do something similar and post things all the time around 9/11, but I'm inspired by you introducing the members of your team like you do every year, and the photos on your personal Facebook page. I read them every year. I look at those pictures every year, and it's just amazing that I guess you have to really thank God that Will, especially you, because you seem to really be on the forefront of making sure, there's only 2 years that survived from below the pile, and I can understand why there was no more. I was there. It's a miraculous that the 2 years survived, and the fact that you actually put so much effort into making sure you honor the members of the Port Authority police officers, especially your own guys that you were next to, is really, I think it's so important. I mean, your message that gets out every year and throughout the year, but especially around 9/11, Will, I'm sure it touches lives all the time because I've gotten to know you and I love you as a guy. Not really, you and I will never want to be called a hero because we're not. We're guys that have a job to do. But the fact that what you do now, and I want to get into the positivity and the how much help you are to other people, that kind of stuff is really above and beyond anything that you and I were ever asked to do on our job, and you are doing it. And that's why I really wanted to have you on here today. So with that being said, Will, again, amazing story. I'm glad you're speaking about it at length because I want to get this out there so people can hear this. But I want to touch on and your Sarge. I never met him. Um, I don't think he's out, or I don't think he talks about a lot of stuff, but just an amazing individual, obviously. And thinking about being in the profession and being in collapse and stuff, his decision to tell you guys to move toward that area to hopefully be somewhere where there would be a void is something you can read about, train. But in that second decision, what he did there is truly years of experience. And he learned from people with more experience than you and I ever had. And he learned and passed it on and used it on that day to save a couple lives. And his goal was to save everybody's life. There's no doubt about it. So it's amazing for the folks that are in for first responders that are out there training and reading and stuff. You really got to look at that because it's just an amazing thing that you two gentlemen made it out. And thank God you did. And obviously, it's so sad. Everything surrounding it is so sad. But to get to the positive note, if we could, today, Will is spending a lot of time. We're going to talk about the books that you wrote. We want to talk about some hunting, um, but if you could, Will, just just touch on what you do these days as far as how you help individuals, because I know you're helping people. Forget first responders. Obviously, a lot of families that lost. Over almost 3,000 members of civilians passed away that day. We're losing folks at astronomical numbers to 9/11 cancer, whether they were just in the area or whether they were people trying to do rescues on 9/11 and for the for a year afterwards or more. So we're losing so many people, but you're out there doing a positive thing right now with your speaking engagements and the books that you wrote. Can you just touch on that stuff so folks can look into that? I was going to cover the books toward the end, but we might as well finish it. Let's talk about the books, talk about what you're doing and how you're helping people, because I know you've helped some people that have nothing to do with police, fire, or first responders, and it's awesome. And then we'll touch on the other stuff. Can you just give us a little info on that?
Yeah, well, listen, my speaking was not anything that I planned on doing. It was 2003. I still wasn't walking right. And my next door neighbor came over and asked me, could you come to the school and talk to the sixth, seventh, and eighth graders at a Catholic school? And I'm like, what am I going to talk about? They're like, just share your story. And I remember thinking to myself, what am I going to talk about? But one of the things that I remember that inspired me to talk to these children, because at the time, the terrorists had us, in fear. These kids didn't want to get on planes. And Antonio Rodriguez's wife, told me that, he's originally from Portugal. They were erecting a statue of him in Portugal, and his kids didn't want to get on a plane because they were scared. And she looked at him and said, "Look, we're going to get on that plane. We all have an expiration date. But till that expiration date comes, we're not going to allow these cowards, these terrorists to rule our lives." And they got on the plane. And I remember that inspired me. And I shared not only what happened, what I just shared with you, but I shared with people that, you know what? Living in fear is you might as well be in prison. We're all going to die one day. We're not getting out of this game alive. So live life to the fullest. Get on planes, go experience things. And that really had an impact on those children. And before I knew it, another school called me, and another school, then high schools, then colleges. Then, of course, my police department, other police departments, military. And that's where the speaking part came of it. But it was 2008 where I spoke to Fairleigh Dickinson University. And I had the pleasure of being asked to come speak every year to a group called Latino Promise. And at that time, the war in Fallujah was raging. And I would always ask, hey, who's a veteran in here? Well, and who's been in theater? That was my way of kind of saying, hey, who's been in the thick of stuff without really touching on it? Because I didn't like to talk about what happened to me. And you'll notice something that people that talk a lot, they really didn't see anything. The people who've seen action, they're kind of quiet because it's hard to share that stuff. But at the end of this one speaking engagement, 2008, this one young Marine came up to me, talked, and he goes, you know, you need to share your story in a way that reaches more people because you've made an impact on me. So I didn't think anything of it. Go back the following year, do the same speech. At the end, as a Q&A. After the Q&A, this gentleman stands up, who was the Marine I spoke to in 2008. And he said, hey, I'd like everybody to listen to Will. He saved my life. And he shared with us that he was looking to end his life. And he thought about three words that I talk about: faith, hope, and love. Having faith in your religion. If you don't have religion, have faith in yourself. Hope, we got to have hope. And love. Love for yourself so you can give love to others. In that you owe yourself happiness. As first responders, military, or anybody who's been through any type of tragedy, as I call it, a darkness, you still have to push to that darkness to get to your sunrise, which is happiness. And he shared that with me. And he came up again and said, you really need to write a book. Now, mind you, there had already been a movie. So I did. I tried to put a book together, and I went back to all the people I knew in Hollywood, and they said, look, we love you, but there's already been a movie. And I said, you don't understand. It's about beyond the movie. It's when I got home. You know, everybody likes to use the word hero, but people don't realize what heroes have to go through with the aftermath. It could be anger, it could be depression, it could be alcoholism. It's PTSD. You know, we have to deal with. And everybody likes to call you a hero till the end of the month. The mortgage company wants its payment. The car company wants their payment. They don't care what you did. So we're back to square one. And I had to deal with PTSD. And and again, my wife is an angel, what she's put up with. So it took a long time. It was the 20th anniversary. I finally got a hold of a friend of mine, Dr. Michael Moats, which I met through hunting. He's actually the brother of a good hunter and friend of mine, and he hunts as well. And we put this book together called Sunrise to the Darkness. You can see it over my shoulder, but Sunrise to the Darkness is what in depth of what I talked about, what happened that day. But what more importantly is the after part, the darkness, me going home, dealing with PTSD, almost destroying my family. I learned so much from this book because my wife actually has a chapter in here, which I learned things about my wife that I didn't know. Like one of the things I didn't know was, what is secondary PTSD? It means like if you're the cop, the firefighter, the soldier who has been in a bad event, you're kind of the focus, but you're not realizing what it's doing to our families around us. And there's so much good here. And I'm very proud of this book because we made the book with Dr. Michael Moats, where he was smart enough to say, hey, you know what? A lot of first responders, military, people in general don't want to talk to therapists, you know? And that's where, unfortunately, some people take their lives. But what we did in here is we put exercise in here that help them till they can get to somewhere. And this book is really made to help anybody who's in a dark place to get one more hour, one more day, one more month, one more year to try to get help. And what people have to understand is darkness is, again, it could be anything in your life. It doesn't have to be the extreme PTSD. You know, it could be you can't pay your mortgage at the end of the month, you're struggling. What we want is for you to fight, keep going, and live a good life. And what I tell people is, you know, I've been blessed to help first responders and veterans. We get feedback. And I cannot tell you, you know, hearing somebody say, hey, you know, I was thinking of ending my life, but I read the book and it's helped me. You know, that's what we wrote it for. But I think what blew my mind the most, which I'll go back to your point where you said that it's not only for first responders, military, but I got a letter from a doctor who said, your book has helped three of my patients. And I'm like, what kind of doctor are you? And she said, I'm a postpartum doctor. It helped three of my female clients who had postpartum. And that blew my mind because we start realizing that tragedies are not competitive. That's something that people have to understand. When people come up to me, Will, I can't think of anything worse than the World Trade Center, 220 stories falling. Sure you can. You lost a loved one. You found out you got cancer. You're terminally ill. You lost a child at childbirth, you know. Everybody has their own World Trade Centers. It's what we do with ourselves to overcome those events. So hence, that's why the book is called Sunrise Through a Darkness. I want people to have happiness. And during 2020, when we wrote this book, it came out for the 20th anniversary. I ended up, someone said, you should write a children's book because you seem to inspire kids. And I'm like, I'm not going to write a children's book. But I met someone whose brother actually wrote children's book. And we came up with this book, Immigrant American Survivor, a little boy who grew up to be 03. And as an immigrant, I'm proud that I came to this country legally, by the way. And you can see I'm wearing a Colombian shirt because I was born in Barranquilla, Colombia, came here too. But my love for this country is great. And what I share in this is my upbringing and teaching kids today, especially today, like, they're always on social media. You're going to go through stuff that we all go through. You're all going to go get bullied or sometimes be the bully. You're all going to have challenges in your life. I talk about my military service. I talk how it took me a while to become a cop, but once I did. And then, of course, I reached my dream as becoming a police officer, and then this horrific tragedy happens. And I have to survive that to continue to have a good life. And let me tell you, everybody, both these books have been a blessing for me because I'm able to help people, inspire kids. And that's one thing. If I leave this earth tomorrow, I can say, hey, man, not only did I try to help people on September 11th, but my life afterwards has been of service, even though I'm retired. I had to retire because of my injuries were so severe. And that's what I think we have to do. In this world, you want to leave something behind. Well, when people bring up your name and they say, hey, that person did good. And I hope I do that, with these books. They're both on Amazon.com. They're at the World Trade Center Memorial, which I'm very proud of, where we get a lot of veterans that come in, and the Sunrise Through the Darkness really helps those veterans. So, if you get a chance, check out my just Will Jimeno, Jimeno on Amazon. Look at my books. And if it's something that you need, I hope you pick it up to help yourself or a loved one, because we have so many people that we love that are in a dark place. And it's also an audio, the Sunrise Through the Darkness. So if someone doesn't want to read, they can listen to it. My whole point is, after that Marine in 2008 told me how I was able to help him, I did that. And I told him as well, now you share your story. And that's what's important. It's not just my story. It's all of our stories. If you've been through something bad, don't be afraid to share that with people who are in a dark place. You might be that pivotal tool they need to overcome their darkness.
Wow, boy, those are some incredible words of inspiration. You just listening to you and everything I can't even imagine. I don't even think you really know how many people you've helped, which is really cool. That's a big reason why you're here with us today. Something I've never even like I said, we never really talked about any of this stuff. So,
Yeah.
but looking
We
at,
always talk
I
on.
knew your book. We always talk on, and we're after this. That's what we're going to talk again, and we're going to stick to that. But I'm looking at listening to the title of your book, which I knew what it was. Never really thought about it before, but what's interesting is on the 12th of September '01, we were there. We got there. Yourself and your sarge were out. Things were eerily quiet because they had called back guys to recount them, and the crew that I drove there with a couple of truckloads of us. But what I'm getting at is we were out on that pile alone, literally alone. We had one Marine with us. My crew of 4 or 5 was 5 of us that day. One of them was a civilian. It was kind of, sun had risen, but it was low. It was barely light, and we're working. And the interesting thing, I'm looking at your title of your book right now, and we were there. It was surreal and somber as sad as could be. And what's really crazy is we stopped. We had gone past we had gone past the spray paint on the beams that told everybody where they searched up to.
Mm-hmm.
We were beyond that by probably 100 yards almost, working our way on everything. And the sun, it was light. It was mildly light out. But when the sun got over the buildings, the low buildings in lower Manhattan there, and actually shone through the facade that was left standing of the towers, with all the paper and the dust and everything that was still blowing around, we actually, my whole crew just stopped and we stared at that sun. And I'm telling you, everybody had their own prayer at the moment. And that sunrise stopped us. And I'm listening to you and how you've helped people. And I'm thinking about it. I remember in my brain going, man, the sun is still rising. Like,
Yeah.
to me, the world stopped. Like, the sun shouldn't be rising, but it does. And it did. It does every day. So, listening to your message and listening to what you named the book, I mean, and then just remembering the days that I witnessed there, and the sun rising, man, it gives hope to a lot of people, like you said. So I'm so happy. I mean, I'm honored to know you, and I mean, just because just everything about you is so great, and the story that and the message you're getting out there is incredible. And we appreciate everything you continue to do, Will, 'cause you're helping so many people, and we all thank you. We all know people that are suffering. So I think grab that book, give it a read, and if it helps you, great. And then maybe hand it off to somebody else, or buy them that book as a gift. And because if you sometimes you're helping people and you don't even know it. And I think you know you're helping people, and I think you have no idea how many people you're really helping. So I think the message, like you said, just get out there and keep helping people. And so I wanna segue into the hunting world, and it's almost like hard to do after all of that. But being I've known you for so long, I would like you just to let's just touch on how, because I know with your physical therapy and everything, if you could give us a little idea how you got, how that helped you progress to getting well, and then mentally and physically, how hunting has helped you. And I want to kind of before we end this, I want to tie it into hunting. Um, I know we can do that because I know you're an unbelievable hunter. I know you are dedicated to hunting, and I know you have so much drive and spirit that anybody in the hunting world loves to be around you for that reason alone. Never mind the first 45 minutes you spent telling us about what you went through, which is incredible. So, Will, tell us how the hunting has really helped you and where you're at today with it.
Well, first of all, I give all the credit to the hunting to my wife, Allison. When I met her, she was the bow hunter. Her and my father-in-law, God rest his soul, Paul, they're the ones who taught me to bow hunt. I remember the first arrow I released, I was hooked. And I think today she regrets it. She created a monster. And as far as being an unbelievable bow hunter, I just have a lot of time. I tell everybody, if you have the time to be in the woods, you're going to get better opportunities. So I'm grateful for that. I don't know about being unbelievable. It's truly a way of life for me. But um, being a bow hunter after 9/11, what that gave me was hope to be able to, um, go back and do what I loved. It changed everything for me. I had to learn how to to be a bow hunter off the ground. I'm pretty proficient with ground blinds and ground blind, being on the ground hunting because of my injuries back right after 9/11. I don't even think ladder stands were out. So for me to get up into a stick ladder or anything like that, that was difficult. I can do ladder stands today, but in the beginning it was difficult. But for me, the world of hunting and bow hunting in particular gave me peace. I could be out there and it was never about the kill at that point. It was more about, hey, I get to see the sunrise, I get to see the animals, I get to see the sunsets. And for me, again, a different perspective was the gift of being able to do that. And today, even I try to bottle up. I tell everybody, like, every sunrise, every sunset, every harvest I get, or even miss, or just seeing the animals, I try to bottle it up because one day I'm not going to be able to do this. If I'm older and not capable to pull my bow back. I just went through another surgery on my shoulder. I'm blessed to be able to be shooting my bow again because that's what I enjoy. So I try to bottle up, and I use the outdoors, or I did use the outdoors to have a goal to get back out there. And there are times still today I'll be like cursing the terrorists, the cowards out because, I can't do certain things. But I also then think to myself, well, look at the positive things you can do. So hunting for me has been something that I enjoy. I love sharing with people. As far as my social media, there was a time I was posting every day. I post like 3 times a week, and I try to make it positive. Sometimes I put my political views on, but my political views are ones that protect America and are for America. But what I try to do is share with my mom and my dad because they're older. So through my social media, they get to see what I'm doing. I get to share it with other people who tell me, hey, I don't have the time to hunt and I love watching your stuff. So that's why I post, and share the good stuff on social media, try to leave all the baggage, the negative stuff out, share where you're inspiring people. Cause like you said, the one good thing about social media is you are inspiring other people. So you try to stay away from the negativity, and there's going to be negative people no matter what, even with our own industry, right? We're our own worst enemy and everything. It could be hunting, it could be car racing, it could be whatever. You have people who are negative. Leave those people aside. Try to be a positive person. Share your obsession, whatever it is. For me, is hunting, especially particularly bow hunting, and I love it. I just can't get enough of it. I have a bucket list of things that I'm still trying to do because I tell people, you don't have that many days on this earth, and it's critical that you try to achieve your dreams, but at the same time, make sure whatever you're doing, you're not omitting your family. Make sure you have the time for those birthdays, those anniversaries, those special moments. Because early on in hunting, I mean, I had friends of mine who no longer with us. They were older. They'd be like, "Oh, I missed my son's birthday because I was chasing this big buck." Guys and ladies out there, those big bucks and those animals are going to be there year after year. The one thing that's important is your family, cherishing those moments, specials, birthdays, anniversaries, and a big buck kill, or whatever you're chasing. But just gauge everything and enjoy every season, because as we get older, we start realizing we're not going to have all those seasons ahead of us for whatever reason. You can get sick, you get older, you might have a disability. But if you have a disability, figure out a way. And I'm sure there's people out there that are going to be willing to help you like they helped me to get out there and chase the critters that we love chasing. So I just love bow hunting. I can't wait. I was blessed already. I started this season off in Tennessee. I tried about 4 or 5 years of 2019 go to Tennessee with a buddy of mine to arrow a velvet buck, which I never had the opportunity for. Didn't work out then. I recently was there for the 3-day season just before my anniversary, and I was able to arrow a beautiful velvet buck. So one off the bucket list, and hopefully now, actually right after September 11th, I'm going to Colorado to chase elk, and I'm hoping to be able to let one fly on a nice elk. So we'll see what happens with that.
That's great stuff. Yeah, I saw what you took down already. And like I said, I see every year you and I share time on the phone and we get together a little bit. But I always enjoy watching you out there, watch you out there, just like everybody. But I always enjoy watching you out there doing what you're doing because I don't know. To me, it's yeah. I look at you as a whole package, and it's a great package. It's a solid dude with so much positivity, and I love everything about it. So to see you out there being successful in the woods, and when I say successful, when I just see that there's a lot of times Will post a picture from the view he has, whether it be in a blind or whatever. That's successful because Will is out there hunting, and I'm the same way. I'm like you, Will. We spend so much time in the woods, and yes, it helps us percentage wise. But like you said, there's nothing better than listening to nature wake up, watching it go to sleep at night, putting your headlight on, getting back out, getting your truck, drive home. It's just on one of these podcasts, I said those days when I drive home, grab a Dunkin' Donuts on a ride home, and I didn't get anything are so successful because we are lucky. You and I are lucky that we get to do it, just like the rest of these hunters. So before we wrap it up, Will, what do you think? I mean, you and I are expressing how much we love what we get to do now with hunting. What do you think? Should we get a young kid into hunting? Should we maybe we get a young dad or mom into maybe archery so they can get into it and pass it on to their kid? I mean, what's your thoughts on that? Because I mean, we had archery in high school. I don't even know if they do it anymore, but I think
Yeah.
it's starting to come back and it's a discipline. Anybody can do it. And it's just a really great thing because you have to learn. It's like a sport. You have to learn how to hit a baseball. So there's that whole coaching and that the camaraderie thing. So just real quick, what's some advice for a young dad maybe to get into if he doesn't hunt himself, get into archery a little bit, get some stuff for the backyard, make sure you're safe, and maybe eventually be able to pass it on to the youth.
Oh, absolutely. I try to do that every year to help people. Last year, I helped a young lady who has killed one deer with a crossbow. She was a veteran, but she'd never taken a deer with her compound, and I helped her last year, and we finally got it done after 2 years. Actually, I think that might be making the United Bowhunter New Jersey magazine story, but it's imperative that we as experienced hunters share our obsession with future generations or also be gone. I mean, we have a decline in hunters as it is today. And what I've noticed is the more people get out to the outdoors, they really value life. They understand that there's more to life than just the hustle and bustle of things. And it's a great American tradition. It challenges you, teaches you that, you can be self-sufficient, God forbid, if you needed to, be able to put food on the table for your family. And my kids, when COVID hit, we were about a week or two away from our shop right not having food. And my kids are like, my dad will go kill a deer. He'll bring food home. But most importantly is that the lessons that hunting and really in life teaches you is a value for life, self-sufficiently, hard work. These are things that people can take from the field and translate it into their personal life. And our kids, they're our future. I'm so proud of being a United Bowhunter New Jersey member and what they do. Like they just recently had a program this past, I believe, week or weekend where they brought new kids to teach them archery. It's imperative that we get these kids. So yes, because these kids are spending so much time on social media, which is just a make-believe world. We want these kids to be able out there and get just a little silly recurve bow just to let that arrow fly. And I've met people who are older at the archery range that don't hunt, but they find archery to be something that is peaceful, relaxful, and keeps them in shape. So I think it's our obligation, especially as hunters who are been in doing this for a long time. I've been doing it for 30 years now, to share our love for that sport. And I try to take new people out, take them to my spots. I'm blessed. I have some really good spots where I can't promise you a buck, but you're going to get a chance at a big old doe. And, you should be proud of that at that moment. And anybody who lets an arrow fly or a bullet go on a deer, I hear people saying, I've probably been guilty of it too. Oh, well, it wasn't big enough. Listen, when you take something's life, that is a trophy. Never apologize. And as men, we got to stop with the macho BS on, well, that's not big enough or this. Nobody cares. I have tons of trophies. I have tons of mounts. And I started realizing after I lost my father-in-law that when we leave this earth, most of our mounts and our stories, they just go in the garbage. Our loved ones that love us will remember. Our friends that are truly friends will remember those stories. So each animal you harvest, each animal you chase, it's the memories we're treasuring. And we got to teach that to our young kids. Go out there, chase whatever critter you're chasing. When you harvest that animal's life, understand, take a moment to give thanks to that, because it really translates in making you a better human being when you understand what life's about, respecting the animal, respecting the game, and enjoying the journey. I just enjoy shooting. I'm just getting back to shooting. I started shooting like 2 weeks before my Tennessee hunt this year, and I was so happy, and I had to drop poundage, but I got the job done, and I can't shoot as much. I'm little practice this week before I head out to Colorado, but I can't wait till next year because it's about a year process for this shoulder injury to heal, where I can just go on back and shoot 20 hours every day and just enjoy it. It's not even at this point for me about the harvest. It's just about the enjoyment of watching that arrow fly. And I think it's imperative that each of us don't just talk about helping the generation, actually going out there and doing it, participating by, if you hear someone say, hey, I'd like to get into archery, but I don't know. I didn't know how to get into archery. I always wanted to try it, but I met my wife. So if you hear somebody, and I know sometimes it takes some of your time away from you, but understand this is how we keep our sport, our way of life alive. So take the time to, be a guide, be a teacher, be a mentor to someone in the outdoor world, whether it be, shotgun hunting, rifle hunting, archery. And, me, I don't shoot a crossbow just because I love the compound. But let's not put down any type of weapon. Let's not be infighting amongst ourselves. Let's support each other and get more people into our way of life, our sport, so we can continue to share this for future generations going forward.
That's and the last toward the end there, you said it's not about, don't talk about it, get out and do it. So figure
Yeah.
out a way to inspire, figure out a way to get somebody involved in this sport that we're passionate about. So great words of advice, Will. Thank you. That's super. We're gonna wrap it up. I think the last thing, I know I kept telling you I'm gonna probably release this on 9/11, but after thinking about it and listening to the whole thing, the story, and then the bow hunting and everything, this may end up. I may get it out for the 9/11 week, which would be tomorrow or Tuesday, because I think people really need to share this. And I'm going to segue into my last question for you. What folks like me and you, we lived it. You lived it at a level that not only two of you can really even comprehend. But for the folks that maybe, what's something that folks can do to maybe just kind of reflect on 9/11, never forget everybody we lost, and maybe if they have social media, want to do a little post or just take their own private moments. You and I we reflect about this every day of the year since '01. But for the people who really don't, I've had some people ask me like, "Hey, what do you think I should do?" And I always tell people, you got to do what you feel is the right thing to do, whatever it is. It might just be a prayer in silence, but coming from you, well, what's a little something somebody can do? And then we're going to wrap it up to try to just make sure the 9/11 and an aspect of 9/11 just keeps on being talked about or mentioned or thought about forever.
Well, it's not only 9/11. I think it's our American freedom. I think that people should teach their children about all American history, from all the wars we've had. For September 11th, of course, because it's newer to our minds. But I think that everybody should honor every type of event that where our men and women have given their lives, because I tell everybody that the American flag is not made out of cloth. It is made out of the blood of patriots. many of which are your family members who served, died, been injured. For us to have our freedoms today to chase the the bucks, the elk, to do whatever it is, motorsports, whatever sport you like, that's freedom that a lot of people throughout the world don't have. So make sure you educate those around you, whether they're adults or children, as to why we're a great American country and why our freedoms are so important. And the way you can help people, I always tell people, is, do something special. A great organization that I love very much is Tunnels to Tower. Donate to them. Either sign up to give the $11 a month, t2t.org, or just go ahead and once a year send a check in to help a first responder, a military person who's put their lives on the line or given their lives on the line for you to be free. It's easy to just enjoy things and not really realize. It's like I said, if you have two great parents, I tell kids when I speak at schools, you want to make a change in the world, go home today to those that are raising you, because not everybody has two perfect parents. Maybe you're adopted, maybe you have a foster parent, maybe you're raised by an aunt or uncle. Just go home today and give them a big hug and tell them thank you for what you're doing, for putting a roof over my head, food on the table, clothes on my back, and watch that smile. And I've had kids come back and tell me, you know what? I made such an impact on them. So for as far as 9/11, of course, we stop and we think and we pray for those we lost and those injured and those that lost loved ones. But make a donation. Make a donation to Tunnels to Tower. It's one of the greatest organizations out there. I tell Frank Siller he should be a saint because what he's created to be able to help so many people. And there's a nice feeling that your money's going to an organization that has been vetted, has been proven, that will help people and is continuing to help fellow Americans that put their lives on the line or have given their lives on the line for us to be free. So that's my advice. Educate people once a year, if you will, if you can, cut a check out to Tunnels to Tower and send it to them, because you are helping a fellow American who truly needs your help.
Amen, brother. Well said. Agree with you again, 100%. It's a great message you got out there for us today. We're going to wrap it up, Will. I know you got, uh, I know you always have a busy week coming up this week. I
Yeah.
know you have a lot of reflecting to do, and I want to tell you, I appreciate you giving me the time and getting on here with me today. This is the first, this whole thing is new to me. You and I've really never talked
Yeah.
about any of this stuff at this length until today. My heartfelt thanks to you for what you for coming on here, but really for what you do all year long for the vets, the all the things you do keep the memory alive of 9/11, being a patriot, being a great American. You're great at it, and you're built for it, and you're doing an awesome job. Don't slow down.
Well, thanks, Stephen. I want to thank you for your service on September 11th, all the firefighters, the police officers, EMTs, all the civilians from all walks of life, from the iron workers to just everybody
Yes.
that showed up that day. I want to say thank you to each and every one of you, because we're great because each and every one of you. I'm very fortunate that they selected us to make a film about, and I'm able to do books, but we're a slither. We're just a slither of a story from the darkest day in U.S. history, but there's so much light, and everybody who's listening to this that has helped on 9/11 and since, God bless you guys, because you're as big as heroes as anybody could ever be.
Amen. Well, and you said the civilians, man. I mean, they don't get enough credit. There's
Yeah.
so many civilians that were there. I mean, I had a guy I had a guy that was working next to me. And we saw civilians get hurt. We saw everybody get hurt, but and the dogs. I mean, the dogs were amazing. Well, I mean, just what they did was amazing. The search dogs, but I saw civilians there, and I asked them what they, where they worked as a fireman or a cop. Nah, I'm just a civilian with a raincoat on, working in the dust because his dad and his grandfather worked on building the towers. That's a true story. And I was like, wow, this guy is standing right next to me, searching because his grandfather and his dad and whoever was part of building the towers, and it was their pride. Yeah, that's a true story. I just thinking about that now. But Will, thank you. We're going to wrap it up, man. We could go on for hours, but from here on out, you and I are going to talk about hunting as we get together, because that's
Yeah.
really what that makes us smile and makes us happy. So let's keep that going. Once again, please get out there, check out Will's book, two books that he has. Go check out the movie that Will was obviously a large inspiration for, and never forget guys like Will and everybody else around this great country that put being a great American above all, because that's what it's all about. So thank you so much, Will. Appreciate your time once again.
Thanks, Steve. God bless you. God bless America. And to every hunter and fellow hunter out there and fellow outdoors woman, shoot straight this season. I hope you get a big one.
Love it. All right, Will, I'll see you soon. We'll be getting together. Thank you.
All right, brother. Take care.
Take care now. At this time, we'd like to thank our supporters and sponsors. Signal 11 Lures, Lip Glue, New Jersey Multi-Species Podcast, Sever Broadheads, Jersey Fluke Bellies, Favorite Fishing Rods, Timberlife Outdoors, and Buck Knives. If you enjoy the content on our podcast, please like and subscribe and turn on notifications. And please tune back in for our next episode. Thank you.